It's Florida Daily TV, brought to you by FloridaDaily.com. For all your news on politics, business, and education, it's FloridaDaily.com. Now, here's your host, Ed Dean.
Welcome to another edition of Florida Daily TV, brought to you by FloridaDaily.com. State Representative Paul Renner, the Flagler County area, right?
That's right.
District 24?
District 24.
Man, good memory. Who is, the proper title would be the incoming speaker for speaker-elect? Is that how we can use it?
Well, speaker designate is Chris Sprouse, and he'll be our speaker after the election. Yeah. God willing, we win the majority.
Are you worried you're not going to? What numbers are you looking at, man?
Every election matters. So.
I know. So he's been on my radio show, and when we've done articles, you've always been good to us at FloridaDaily.com. I got to tell you something. As a lawyer, you are. ACB, Amy Coney Barrett, forget about where I may stand. She knocked it out of the ballpark. In fact, the Democrats are ticked off at the other Democrats for being polite to her. This didn't have a lot of fanfare like we saw. You were on my radio show back during Brett Kavanaugh. Sure. That was a circus. She knocked it out of the ballpark. On a scale of 1 to 10, what was the overall proceedings?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your view on this because you do a lot of judiciary. As a state rep, tell me what your views were on this.
No, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd give her an 11. I think she taught us two things. One is that she is an absolutely brilliant legal mind who's well qualified to be our next Supreme Court justice, number one. But equally important, perhaps more so, is she did a great job, like a law school course, of setting out the proper role of a judge in our society, which, as she stated many times, is to interpret the law as it is, not as what you think it should be, to have fidelity to the rule of law and the Constitution, not some political agenda. The judiciary is the one non-political branch in our system, and it's so critical that judges interpret statutes and look at the Constitution from neutral principles. And you get into the technical side of textualism and originalism.
Right, we heard that a lot, yeah.
But the whole idea of that is it takes my personal views out of it. That's why Justice Scalia rendered some judgments with respect to the Fourth Amendment that were defense-friendly, that were friendly to criminal defendants. Not necessarily a conservative outcome.
Right.
We're law and order.
You're right.
Flag burning. Flag burning was another one where he said, look, I find flag burning reprehensible, but it's political speach protected by the First Amendment.
He agreed with the ACLU against the Jerry Falwell case. You just got read up on that. So to your point, you're correct.
So the point there is she doesn't want, I don't want, Republicans don't want conservative judges that reach conservative outcomes. The media oftentimes talks about it as if we're going to vote. Amy Coney Barrett's going to vote on the ACA. No, she's going to look at a narrow legal issue and interpret it based independent of where she stands on that law. That's what we want. We want judges who interpret the law as it is, not what they think.
To your point, this has been, I think, a lot of things on the left, and I'm telling you, this has been my years as a reporter. And you've been critical, even some, if a Republican isn't truthful, we call it out, but the Democrats, a lot of this is manufactured out there. For example, it is a 4-4 decision right now on California versus Texas on the individual mandate that, again, the court struck it down. They had to bring it to the Supreme Court. If this is a 4-4 decision, the lower court, as you know, guess what? Obamacare's gone. So they keep acting like she's that deciding vote. As you pointed out, no, she is not.
Right.
On that one. What is it on this? When you hear the word, there's so much I want to cover here with ACB here, Amy Coney Barrett, that when you hear the word judicial activism, what red flags come up? Or give me an example, or when you hear about it, is it overused?
No, I don't think it is. And I think the reason we have such, acrimony over these nominations is because judges are outside their lane. They're doing more than they're supposed to be doing, and they have a lifetime appointment. That's why we give them a lifetime appointment, so that they're insulated from the politics, but we can't allow them to be engaged in politics.
Right.
And so I think that is what activism really means. Justice Scalia, again, talked about kind of the progressive mindset about the Constitution, that if you really, really think something is important, then by golly, it ought to be protected by the Constitution, whether it's in the Constitution or not. And conversely, if you think something's really, really bad and should be unconstitutional, well, those judges seem to put their imprint into the Constitution. They read into the Constitution things that are not there. The Constitution doesn't answer every question, and most questions are really left to we the people. Remember, when the court steps in, like in Roe v. Wade, I know that's one of the controversial issues, and says all these laws are unconstitutional, it means that you and I and everybody else in the world has no right to weigh in on where that line should be drawn.
Good point.
It takes away from democracy. And those are political questions. There's no discussion in the Constitution about the issue of abortion. It's one of those many, many issues that the Constitution's simply silent on.
That is a great point. When I look at a news story and some of my liberal counterparts, I'm like, wait a second, what story did you read to my point? You had a judge that sat back and said, no, we're going to let this lawsuit from the Teachers Unions Association about school reopening, which we have showed where that is nothing more than another manufactured outrage, and it has, especially when they talked about back in May and June of already planning to reopen the schools with unions' advice. Oh, no. No, we got too much safety. In other words, there was a bunch of garbage out there. And then you had a Florida appellate court says, no, that lawsuit shouldn't move forward. We don't see anything there that has any standing grounds. So to your point, how is it you've got something that's, you've talked about, and one judge sees it one way, another judge sees it another way?
Yeah. Well, in Justice Gorsuch, in his book, his recent book, Republic If You Can Keep It, points this out. But if a judge never in a 20-year career reaches an outcome that differs from his or her own political outcome or preferences, they shouldn't be on the bench. They should be running for office.
Interesting, yes.
And just I mentioned Justice Scalia. That's just going to be the case. And the judges we want, and the judges I think Donald Trump has nominated, are going to call it the way they see it. And sometimes that's going to disappoint conservatives because
I agree.
The right legal judgment happens to be a liberal outcome. Why? Because the statute that's coming to them, and take the ACA as an example, I'm not so sure. Many conservative scholars look at the severability issue because there's two parts of that and say this is a stone cold loser in the Supreme Court, that Obamacare is not going to be struck down because that severability issue is just one that the courts are going to give great deference because the people, whether we like it or not, the people elected a Democrat president, a Democrat Congress, passed the ACA. And so on that severability issue, as Judge Barrett so eloquently talked about, there's going to be a lot of deference to, did Congress want everything to fall if one piece fell? Now, that individual mandate may fall. Because remember, that was where they did the switcheroo, and they said to pass it, we don't know it's not a tax, but now it's a tax for purposes of upholding it constitutionally. So that could well fall because, of course, the recent Congress zeroed that out. So you're no longer penalized for not being able to pay for unaffordable health insurance under Obamacare.
I'm leading this question up. I think you know where I'm going with it. How many, for the audience out there, how many Supreme Court justices are in the Florida State Supreme Court?
7.
Any law preventing governor from packing them up more?
No, and we have control. And I will tell you,
you have control as a legislator, right?
We can do that. We can do that. And so, what I would say to you is that that's absolutely wrong. And so, again, that's the one non-political branch. And if you do that, what you're basically doing is creating one-party control. The courts have played a very important role, and this is often lost. And I've not heard it being discussed, but the court oftentimes is the last refuge and protector of minority viewpoints. And if Democrats are able to come in and say, you know what, how many do we need? 4, 5, 6 to have total dominance, justices that'll be partisan in their viewpoint and just pass through everything we pass and never question anything. You have majoritarian rule, and our founding fathers set it up so that we have these checks and balances. You destroy the independent judiciary, you destroy checks and balances. It means there's nothing there to protect people that are being canceled out of our society.
It's like they may win. I don't know what's going to happen. But they always want to change the rules if they're never happy. Instead, maybe you ought to look at the players you're putting up, and they can't win. Having said this is what I find interesting. The biggest issues, of course, is the economy and COVID and tourism in the state of Florida. But Supreme Court packing doesn't even come up. I mean, it's a fun issue to talk about on radio, I'll tell you that. But I don't know if it's going to make or break an election. I know you're a policy guy, but I'm asking you to put on the analysis hat on just for the audience's sake. What if Biden is up by 11 points? You think a Supreme Court packing where he supports it or not is going to redo it? I mean, why do you don't think he'll take a position on this? I'm just kind of curious. If it's not a big issue, what are you afraid of, Joe Biden?
Well, yeah, because the left, the progressive part of the Democrat Party, which is really kind of the beating heart of the Democratic Party these days, wants to do that. They've discussed seriously adding Washington, D.C., which is overwhelmingly Democrat, as a state. So that they get 2 Democrat senators, adding Puerto Rico as a state to get another 2 Democrat senators, abolishing the Electoral College, abolishing the filibuster, whatever it takes to knock down those checks and balances to whatever their desired policy objectives are. That's not how our system's set up. It's set up to slow things down a little bit, make sure we're making the right decisions so that when Republicans come rushing in with big majorities, we don't have our way with whatever we want to do. There's things there that kind of kneecap us along the way. That's a good thing, Ed. That's a good thing.
I'm with you.
And so
trust me. This
would be knocking down a critical check and balance by destroying the independent judiciary, because you just say we're putting partisans in.
We talked about a week ago having you come on. I was like, man, I'm a big fan of the representatives. I've always told people, I said, when you meet Representative Paul Renner, I'm not saying this to appease you. I said, most elected officials have egos. Paul is the most laid back guy. He's the type of guy, hey, man, let's go hang out. As I golf, it's the 19th hole. You know what I'm saying? Let's go out and have a drink, or let's have some coffee and let's talk. But when you knew coming up over the last week, ACB was going to have the confirmation hearings. And I was like, man, I said, the timing, I can't. Well, I said, I want Representative Renner on after they do the hearings here. Was your first reaction that this was going to be another Kavanaugh situation? Was this going to be a circus? Or were you sitting back going, you had Mitt Romney come and say, I think I'm going to give her my support. Were you a little bit more calmed down, or did you thought that maybe this was going to look like another Kavanaugh situation? What was your first take?
Yeah, I mean, we're not done yet. I mean, of course, they're holding over the nomination for a week, and that's, I believe, if I recall, in Kavanaugh, where he got through, and then they, outsprings these allegations, and it's World War III. Look, I think people feel very, very strongly in opposition out there, and they're spending money, and they're got their activist base in a fury over this. Don't be surprised if there's not some 11th hour attempt. But I will say this. I just think she was so impressive. I think she became, and we don't want judges to be celebrities either, but I think she became a celebrity. For what she stands for. She's a conservative woman, and I think that's important. She's only the 5th woman on the Supreme Court ever. And I think for a lot, I'm a dad of a new daughter. So, I mean, I have a lot of pride because I look and say Abigail Grace may be a Supreme Court justice one day, and in the likes or in the mold of Amy Coney Barrett, where she's saying my mentor instead of Scalia is Amy Coney Barrett as an ideal Supreme Court justice, and I think she'll be just that. She may be the best we've had. So
I know you're on the road a lot, so we'll have to do it through Zoom, which is still on here on Florida Daily T and on the radio show, but. Tom Spencer, who was on the Bush campaign, he's election analyst for the Lawyers Defense Fund. Tom's been on our show. We got a big article coming out in Florida Daily, and he is like, and I know we may want to do more of this maybe next week, but I'm just going to jump into it real quick because I know we want to talk about the Supreme Court nominee. He says, Ed, don't be surprised if the election goes all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. Like he was on the Bush versus Gore team, and it's a great issue. A lot of people, it's a different issue, and he says we already see it right now, predominantly a lot of the South Florida areas. He says don't be surprised to what you just referred to a few minutes ago. Don't be surprised if a federal judge, because the law's set with you, Representative Renner. Don't be surprised if a federal judge sits back and says, "Nah, we're not going to regard what the state voted upon. I'm going to allow certain ballots to be redone or extend certain things like that." So I know, but I'd have to assume this may end up going down the pike, and who the guy I'm going to call, you'd be the first one, because I assume it's going to happen. Legal challenges?
Absolutely. We always have close elections in Florida, and I don't think this is going to be any exception. And then throughout the state, in some states, we count our absentee ballots. They're being canvassed now and held and sequestered in secret. But some states don't count their absentee ballots until the night of election. And that means it will necessarily be days and days in some of these swing states before we know the outcome.
Yeah.
And so that's unfortunate. We don't want to have elections land in the courts. I'll say that very clearly. Right. It's better for the country for a clear, decisive result.
Because both sides are all lawyered up. I get it.
Yeah, I don't want the Supreme Court deciding this election. I really don't. But they may have to. I mean, if it's that close.
You would like to enjoy your holidays, wouldn't you?
Yeah, my word! I mean, it's just good for the country not to have hanging chads and with the
intent of that. I like that. I'm glad you came on, and you guys can come on anytime you would like. Here also on the radio show. State Representative Paul Renner, House District 24, Northeast Florida, for a lot of you statewide that follow us in the Flagler County area. And I've fished down in that area before. Again, Speaker Designate. And I'm glad you came on with us today.
Great to be with you, Ed.
All right.
Thanks so much.
Another edition of Florida Daily TV right here at floridadaily.com.